to introduce Nicole Moen, who will be taking us into what actually new models and new ways of doing things economically that are already happening, so you can actually see how people are meeting this challenge of shifting the paradigm. Let me introduce Nicole. I met Nicole a few years back when she first started something called Living the New Economy, which is now spread all over the world. And it's bringing together people that are actually practitioners of some of these new economic models and get together sometimes for 7 days in a row to talk about them and share what they're doing. So I'm really happy that she can be here sharing everything that she's seen now, having produced a number of these events in Vancouver, Victoria, and now it's actually spread to the UK and California, and probably some more in the works. But so just by way of introduction, Nicole has started to call herself a serial founder. So initiatives of hers range from Body Heals Integrative Medicine events and Animate Community Inc. To the Victoria Community Health Cooperative and the Healing Cities Institute Society, all of which she co-founded. And then recently, as I mentioned, she founded the Living the New Economy events, which she co-developed with a man named Geoff Gossen. And Living the New Economy grew from a gradual instant in May 2012 when she awoke with the hit that the dominant financial system underpinned fundamental issues in every context that she'd worked and lived in. Living the New Economy quickly became one of the leading new economic forums worldwide, taking place twice in Vancouver, twice in Victoria, and internationally in California and the UK. This journey has given her a unique 30,000 foot view, rather, of the weave of connections between issues in health, sustainable urban development, various approaches to finance and economies, and our inner and relational lives. A speaker, writer, visionary, facilitator, counselor, coach, and consultant, she grounds everything she does in family life and the literal dirt while gardening or via walking, especially barefoot in the ocean.
Yeah.
Nicole.
Can you just go for that right now, barefoot in the ocean? And if you're warm, these things make a good stand. Thank you, Jordan. Wow. And thank you all for being here. Essentially, and I've been working on this already, and I think Jordan knew this, but essentially what I've attempted to do here for this afternoon is to condense 7 days of events, which was the equivalent of about 21 events, 21 3-hour events, into 3 hours for you guys. That's it. So I am really honored to be here. The Green Party is doing some extraordinary work, and I just heard that Green Party support's gone from 4%. Was that federally?
This was in Burnaby, North Seymour, in a specific
Oh, okay,
riding, yeah.
in a specific riding,
Yeah.
4% in Burnaby, North Seymour, from 4% to 19%.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So Jordan did this earlier this morning, but I also want to honor the fact that we are up on unceded land from indigenous land of the, and you're going to have to say this for me, Jordan.
Nanaimo.
Nanaimo. Oh,
Excellent.
Nanaimo.
That's where Nanaimo comes from.
Okay, right. And I'd just like to take a moment to pause with that fact. Because nobody gave us this, us colonizers, this land. We just kind of moved in. We said, here we are, do it our way. It's kind of a sobering thing for me. So I usually, when I produce events, I like to have live music in the in-between bits, and I don't have live music today. So you're going to have to put up with me reading you a poem instead. As just a start. My daughter is a spoken word poet, and she does this much better than I usually get her to do it if she can come. But she's in school, she's 17. I must remember that everything I do affects others in the world, now and into the future. And so I must weigh what I do against every consequence that the world will be brought to bear on account of my actions well beyond my own lifespan. I must remember that we are inextricably bound to each other, and that more than I can ever repay has been sacrificed in order that I may live. I must remember my indebtedness to others and to the earth that feeds me, and let my remembering be known by my humility and manner of walking. And that service is what is required from adults when pressed to surrender childhood. I must labor to be grateful for the threads that bind me to the mysterious and holy weave, and I must remember that in truth, my dreams are not my own. Not I, but the wind that blows through me. I often think about the fact that I don't do this work for myself, this progressive piece of work that I've been doing most of my life in one way or another, but that I do it for my kid, I do it for her kids, and all the other kids and grandkids and great-grandkids coming from us, that I'm an ancestor of future generations who will look back on the work that I do, and who do I want to be as part of my role. So, who am I? Jordan went through a bunch of things. I came to economy through a few decades of working in integrated medicine, mostly. I did some work in sustainable urban development, and part of that is the Healing Cities Institute Society. And through that 3 a.m. hit, that all the work that I've done in those realms, always pushing the envelope. The underpinning issue where things having to do with money and the economy, and is there something we could do about that? So I also came to the economy, new economy. I'm not an economist, I'll just put that out there. Through my own genetic lineage, I was reading my great-grandfather on my mother's dad's side. I was reading his autobiography, and he was writing in the 1950s. He was bedridden for about the last 10 years of his life, so he wrote a lot. And he was writing about the stuff that we're talking about now as being really important issues. He was seeing the degradation of the environment relative to how we were doing economic things, and he was writing in the early 1950s. And I'm reading this stuff, and I'm going, whoa, I got goosebumps, and I'm like, am I channeling this guy or something? Because it was so in alignment from back then. Jordan, you can go to the next slide. Sorry, I forgot to say something. There we go. So I have some foundational assumptions too. Assumptions and places from which I'm coming, I guess. I'm interested in the practical application in particular. So the on the ground, in real life, what are people actually doing? Definitely a lot of these things are based in theory, and that is very important as well. For me, I'm particularly interested in the practical aspects of this thing. So I'm assuming that there is climate change happening, and at a rate faster than we previously imagined. The way I kind of see it is that the current dominant economy hasn't been around forever. It's been, depending on who you talk to, anywhere from the past 500 to 250 years, somewhere in there it started. And it's been this giant experiment that ultimately isn't, in its current way that it's presenting itself, it's not serving humans or life on the planet. One of the speakers that comes to the New Economy events, Tad Hargrave, says that we pour our faithfulness into an economy predicated on turning living things into dead things. And that's not going to work forever. I also think we're smart. I think we're really smart, and I think that we're profoundly smarter collectively, and that if we can learn to cooperate, truly cooperate at a deep level, and be kind to each other, that we can get a lot of stuff done in a very short period of time. I also think there's no easy way out. This is a complex thing that we're dealing with. And I also think we really don't know what to do. So I want to start there, I think. And that's not an admission of defeat, but it's an admission that this is very complex. and that there's no one answer, and no one person or group of people or whoever at this point really know what it is we're doing. And so for me then, the point becomes holding on to the questions that are coming up. So like, how do we keep acting while we're holding the question, how do we reverse climate change? Without having the answers, can we still keep moving forward? How do we adapt on the fly as we're holding that question and we keep moving? The metrics to measure these things, they're emerging. We don't necessarily have, Jordan, you probably know more about this than I do, but there are some ways to measure some of this stuff, but they're emerging and they're not finished in a lot of cases, but I think we still need to keep doing the work and let the metrics find their way forward so that we can measure things. I would submit too that we actually don't have a problem, but a predicament, which is a problem has a solution, a predicament is infinitely more complex, that requires multiple, I don't know, inputs to shift something. And another way to put it, it comes from Charles Eisenstein, who wrote this book as part of the Just for Living the New Economy, Sacred Economics, and The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. That's the other book that he wrote after this. And one of the things that he says is that we're in a time between stories. Some people will call that liminal space, where you're not where you were before, and we're not where we're going yet. So, you know, you could actually argue we're always there, but I think there are times when that's more forward. So those are my assumptions, and you can't use an old map to find a new land. Oh. You're quick. I love that, that saying, that we do have to bring some new ways of being, new ways of thinking, new ways of coming to the material in front of us to shift it. So I'm curious who's in the room. Now, I know there's an economist, and one, oh, should I not point you out? Sorry. I know there's a municipally elected Green Party guy. I know there's a therapist. Sorry? Local,
I'm
sorry.
a regional district area director, which is different from municipal.
I'm not a politician in the room, as you can tell.
Sorry
I imagine
for being pedantic.
that's no, it's okay. I don't mind. I imagine there's some government people in the room. Work for the government? No.
They won't put their hands up.
Municipal.
They're down.
They're the ones that don't put their hands up, right? Self-employed?
Sorry, what?
Self-employed?
That would be me too. Economists, any other economists? Cool. Any other Nicoles? I know there's one. We're starting a club, Nicoles for the New Economy. There's a few around. What am I missing? Retired. Oh, and Green Party people. Volunteers, employees. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Thank you. I was just curious about that. So Jordan mentioned Living the New Economy. This is a picture of 2013 in Victoria on the final day. The crew that was gathered there at the end. And so we're covering a lot of material. I'm going to skim the surface. If you're not, you might not understand some of the things that I'm saying. But what the point that I'm trying to get to, my intention, is to give you the broad scope picture of what's emerging, so that you start to get a sense of how these things could connect and how they are starting to respond to the issues we were talking about earlier this morning. Not used to this PowerPoint thing. So just want to address why we called it Living the New Economy, and it's because I think what part of the point of the new economy things is that it is active, it's changing, it's responsive to the moment, it's alive, it's dynamic, it's adaptable. It's not something you land in and you say, here I am, new economy. It's not like that. It's continually evolving because things are continually evolving. Why new economy? It was just kind of the best word that seemed to emerge as an umbrella concept for all the things I'm going to talk about today. There's nothing new under the sun in some respects, and a lot of what I'll bring up are actually very old, some of them ancient concepts that are re-emerging in a modern context. So new applications of those old principles, practices, tools, methodologies. So what is the new economy? I deliberately put this text on an angle so my intention was to make you feel less a little like, what? Because some of this stuff does that to you, you know, and you're going, what? I don't get it. It makes you feel uncomfortable, because it's not a single idea that you can kind of point to and say, that's the new economy. That's your line, Jordan. But it's a deepening collection of existing and emerging approaches to how we're resourcing ourselves, how we are on the planet, and how we are with each other and within ourselves as well. And it's integration. It's not ditching the old for the new, it's more of a both-and conversation. The debate we did earlier was fascinating to me because I don't know if I'm just a fence sitter at heart, but I didn't see the sides there. I think it's a both-and. It's like, and so we're sort of hardwired to differentiate. We're kind of hardwired to either or. And I think moving into this realm, into these new paradigm shifts that we're talking about, requires starting to help us build capacities to hold apparently paradoxical perspectives and see what emerges between them. We'll get into that a little bit more. I'm going to move on. So I'm going to start, so the first half of this afternoon, we're going to go through these 5 principles, themes, capacities. It's hard to know what to call these things because they're quite varied. That you see here. There's a Starhawk quote, "Community is the antidote to climate change." She just did a permaculture design certificate 3-week course up at our eco-village, or down at our eco-village from here. I live in Victoria. And that was that was a quote from that. Okay. So we're going to start with local. So just some of the fundamental, next one. Thanks. Some of the fundamental pieces of local have to do with becoming connected or reconnected with nature, to spend time in nature, sit close, touch it, research it, really dig in. So, you know, that bottom picture is kind of that. It's also about growing food locally and purchasing food locally, and this is an emerging field called permaculture. Anybody who's heard of permaculture? I'm going to talk about it quite a lot. I hope most people have heard about it. Okay. So permaculture comes from blending permanent and agriculture. Permanent agriculture. A lot of people now say it's actually permanent culture because the permaculture design practices and principles can be applied in any context, not just. So this is local food. This is a perma-blitz I was at a couple months ago. Nick Poeta here is one of a permaculturist, and they were installing in somebody's front yard. They were changing this sort of bumpy lawn with a few random trees into a food forest, and this was part of the initial digging and so on. So really, really local food. The other thing about local is knowing the people that you're purchasing from, and trading with, or gifting to or from, and to know your neighbors, and that's what this photo over here is. A market actually in France where some of my relatives are from, and that was the market that sold the the produce, like vegetables and fruit and so on, and cheeses and meats and oils and pâtés and very delicious. It's France. From, I think it was 20 to 25 local farmers. Had small farms, and they also had a commercial kitchen where they could create the sort of value-added goods that they were selling. And they also had an abattoir for birds there as well, that everyone who had those kinds of things could use. So it was a cooperative without actually being a formal cooperative. And they know each other, and I would go in there and I would chat with the woman, some of my relatives used to come from that actual area, and I got to know her in the time I was there. I was there for several weeks, and you establish a relationship and some trust and communication and sort of more heart level connections with people, as opposed to ordering something on Amazon where there actually isn't a human being involved. And you know, placemaking is another thing that comes in with local. How many know about Mark Lakeman and City Repair down in Portland, Oregon? So Mark Lakeman, about 15 years ago, started an organization called City Repair that, holding this up because this is his book on placemaking, where he started to integrate it into his own neighborhood, ways that people in his physical neighborhood could connect. And that's where you get things you've probably seen, these painted intersections, these big circular things that started in his neighborhood. This was the first one. There's now 300 of them or something like that.
Just in Portland.
Just in Portland, yeah. And they're everywhere. I'm already doing too much talking. So it's about connecting with your neighbors. They went around door to door. They figured out who was in the neighborhood. They found out what they did, what they had to share, and then so they combined their resources, and their neighborhood kind of became a library for everybody else to borrow tools or to borrow, I don't know, punch bowls for the party or whatever was needed. So that's part of the local conversation, and I wanted to read you, because local is a really important part. I picked up this book. So Woodward's Country Homes, Houses of Moderate Cost from 1865. And it's a photocopy of it. And it's got like house plans, and houses of moderate cost, by the way, were like $2,000.
Yeah.
And they were stone and wood and, you know, these gorgeous things. And they were talking, in this section, they're talking about how you can build one house here in this location, and it might cost more or less relative to the same house built over here in this other location. So I just want to read you this bit because it just really caught my attention. On one site, stone may be easily obtained. A sandbank on the premises, a running brook close at hand, sawmills, brickyards, and lime kilns within moderate distances and accessible by good roads. The other site may be quite reverse in situation, or have some decided disadvantages in obtaining some very necessary materials. We once built a fine stone house where stone was abundant and close at hand, but all the lumber and brick had to be hauled 13 miles over hilly roads. The cost of that house has nothing to do with the cost of a similar house in a different locality. So their point was that the 13 miles increased the price of that house because it was so far. And I think that's what we mean by local. All right. Community, relationship, village. We touched on village a little bit in the morning, as I recall. I think it was your table when you were talking about your question. So relationships with nature, developing relationships with nature and other beings, even the moths. I talked earlier about purchasing with people we purchase from or transact with or share with, relationships with them. Friends, with our friends, our family, and ourselves. We seem to neglect ourselves in this conversation. Community connections and placemaking. That's the same market, and that's the woman who owns it. That's me with short hair many moons ago. And this is one of my favorite placemaking type ideas that I've seen on the planet. It's in Bordeaux, in France, and it's called Miroir d'eau, and it has three, I think we should have these here everywhere. It has three stages in the water. So this is the mist stage. So so it's flat and it's stone and there's little holes in it. And at a certain stage, this mist comes out and you walk through it, and it's so amazing on a hot summer day to walk through this mist. And you can see it draws people out of the woodwork. People just walking home from work walk through this. And so the other stage is the mirror stage. That's where the miroir d'eau comes. It's just this very, very, very thin layer of water that reflects everything around it, including those, those gorgeous old buildings and the people standing there. And then the third stage, it's about 2 inches deep, the water, and of course the kids love to sit it and paddle. And each stage is about 5 minutes long, and it just cycles through it. And it was just this really fabulous way of bringing people together to interact and just enjoy. And so that would be considered a type of placemaking. So one of the things we're talking about for the next Living the New Economy is focusing on the village's idea, the community idea. So recreating ourselves as villagers, or our places as villages. One of the questions that comes up in the Healing Cities context is, can you take a suburb and recreate it into a village? What does it take? I mean, when there are no sort of, it's a car-oriented community, can you recreate it so that it's on a human scale for walking and biking and accidental meeting places and a place where you can go buy, your groceries and stuff that you can walk to. So a place built around the people that are there, not cars. So diversity, we talked a little bit about that this morning as well. Nature naturally creates diversity, which is more resilient, less prone to disease. Took a picture of this rock with moss on it, and it's hard to tell here, but I counted with my untrained moss eye at least 5 different kinds of moss, and it's like this big. So quite different from monoculture, which can crash with one disease gets into a wheat field, the wheat field's gone. If one of these mosses got a disease, that moss might be gone, but the other 4 would still be there. So there's more resilience. Similar, diversity in an orchestra, that's a fiddle orchestra. They also have, they have violins and cellos and bass and violas, but there's some guitar and there's a harp and there's piano and, I think there's singers there as well. So with the diversity, it's richer, more fun, and it's kind of vive la différence. It just adds a lot more to our lives aesthetically as well as in terms of resilience. And gardens and permaculture installations. Permaculture makes a point of being diverse. It's not a monoculture installation. Most of the plants are perennials, not annuals, and they're layered. And this is a garden, not a permaculture installation. But in France, it's the farm that supported one of the chateaus on the Loire River Valley.
There's some music.
There's some music. Thanks. So the chateau was the Chenonceau. Never mind. And so they had the farm set up as it would have been in the day. Like they planted the plants that would have been planted there. And it supported the whole community, including people who lived on the farm, but also the people who lived in the chateau and the surrounding area. And it was hyper-local. It was just next door. Next one. So we use the word sustainability, and I find it's a difficult word. And because the question comes up in my mind, what are we sustaining? Exactly. And I would wager that we actually don't want to sustain what's happening right now in terms of our economy. So then what is the thing? And this is something Jordan and I have talked about a bit, and this is comes through the permaculture lens as well, is that we need to be doing things that are regenerative to get ourselves to the point where we might say, okay, now we want to sustain this. And honestly, I think that's going to take generations. So when we're not talking about in our lifetimes of anybody in this room, I don't think. But that's the work that needs to be done. So we're pointing to regenerative systems, food policy, business models, transportation, housing, energy. This is a couple of local permacultures again. They're in the oldest food forest in Canada, which is in Victoria in the Fernwood neighborhood. It's about 16 years old now. And so they were doing a big permablitz to maintain it. It's public. People can just walk around, and it's really cool. This is Mark Lakeman that I was talking about earlier with the placemaking stuff. Right there, this is Victoria City Hall. That's our mayor, Lisa Helps. I'm not sure who this guy is. And Mark was coming to talk about how to help the city come up with regenerative solutions to homelessness. And specifically in this case, we were talking about tiny house villages, like Dignity Village in Portland. There's another fellow there whose name is escaping me in the moment, Andrew something, from Eugene, Oregon. And they were taking a page out of Mark's book, and they had set up a prototype tiny house village. He had some extraordinary stats to put forward, and basically one of the things he was saying is that costs go way down with the tiny house villages, that shelters cost about $22 per person per night. Tiny house villages was $3 per person per night in the model that they were using. So saves money. People become self-regenerative in those kinds of contexts. They have a community they're living in all of a sudden. They start to become self-supporting. They become responsible for their own space and for the community. And like I said, also less expensive. Yeah, we'll stop there. So this, how are we doing for time? Holistic and integrative is another thread that goes through the new economy work. And this will eventually lead us into our first exercise. We're going to do 2 exercises, by the way. And in the second half, I'll get into the tools and practices that are emerging. I'll list as many of them as I can and explain them briefly. Things like sharing economy, gift economy, peer-to-peer lending, impact investing, all those kinds of things that you may have heard about a little bit. We'll go through those in the second half, if you're wondering. So holistic and integrative, I noticed when I was trying to find photos for this one, I ended up turning to art, because there isn't kind of a photo that says holistic or integrative necessarily. And sometimes that integration can look a little chaotic. This is a Chihuly glass ceiling from Seattle, Tacoma. This is obviously tiled floor. And they're both beautiful. They're integrating diverse bits and pieces in that sort of both and way. So it can either look chaotic, still be beautiful, or look patterned. Yeah, and so these concepts are less in the realm of how you can describe them and more in the realm of our lived experience and how we understand them. So we'll get into that in a minute. So if we take integrative medicine, for example, in terms of integration, integrative medicine is mainstream medicine and complementary practices like acupuncture or massage or herbal medicine or simple nutrition and so on, held together as a way to approach health issues. So, you know, if you break your leg, you want a surgeon and surgery and drugs, probably. Mint tea just isn't going to cut it in that situation. You know, you have to. So it's not a ditching of the old system. It's using what works there. But when you look at things, when you start to look at things holistically, then you start to see the holes, and you start to see what's working and what's not working. And then what isn't working, you can alter it or drop it, whatever is needed. But as a whole, you're holding all of it. So same in the new economy. You know, we're ditching nothing. The old dominant economy, among them. The intention is not to stop using money or not to ditch old systems, but like I said, when we can see the whole, you start to see the holes. Okay, wrap your mind around that one for a sec. And you start to get to things like that Einstein quote you've probably heard, that you can't solve a problem at the same level it was created.
Same level of thinking.
Same level of thinking that it was created. So if all our thinking is just coming from here, which it has typically in the past, it's very, we'll get to it in a minute. It's very egocentric as opposed to eco-centric. That might not be what we need to do. Another integration example is I spent a lot of time in France. So there's another picture in France, and it's called, the French call it the troglodyte, or troglodyte. And it, if you go back tens of thousands of years, people who were living in the area we now call France, they were living in caves, in cliffs. And there are modern applications of that. People have built their houses into the cliffs, so they've integrated their homes into the natural landscape. They haven't sort of, you know, taken the cliff down to build what they want, but they've gotten what they need and what they want to from both. So there are skills and capacities that we can learn. Maybe some of us know them already, to start seeing the whole in anything. And we want to understand that language of knowing. Be the change you want to see. Maybe you've heard that one too. Gandhi. Because we do want whole systems out there. We want systems that have been looking at things from a holistic perspective. And concurrent to those whole systems work out there, we want whole systems work in here, inside ourselves. And I'll get to that in a little bit more when we get into the exercise. But first of all, any questions? I've been rattling on here for 3/4 of an hour almost. So. Take a breath. I am. Questions? Yes?
Oh, what did you mean by that 3 a.m. thing? Way back,
Oh, wow.
something you did?
I just woke up at 3 a.m. with the hit that I had to do an event on Monday. That's all. Small dip.
Oh, 3 a.m., huh?
Yeah, I just have to. In fact, it was May 19th.
Oh.
And so
Oh.
2 days ago was the 3-year anniversary of living the new economy, Jordan.
Wow.
And very shortly after that, I met Jordan, by the way. Jordan and 2 other fellows were working on community currency that we'll talk about later in Vancouver. And you guys were the first to the mark and on board and supporting the whole thing.
The whole thing?
Absolutely.
With a W.
The whole thing of the whole thing. So no more questions? Questions? That's good. We can go to the next one. So, what do you see in the world? And when you see that thing that you see in the world, what systems get designed from there? different things that so sometimes, you believe stuff they don't even know you believe because they're so embedded culturally in our worlds or in our families or in our country or whatever context, communities, various kinds. So, so we're just going to compare and contrast these things a little bit. We probably won't do them all. But just sit for a moment with what happens inside you when you believe that the earth equals resources. So that you believe that the natural world is a resource that only has value when you convert it into cash or stuff. So if you believe that as a fundamental tenet of how you operate in the world, imagine what kind of systems get designed. Maybe the ones we have now? So contrasting with that, if we believe the earth equals our relatives, that's a more indigenous worldview, that the world is full of relatives, not resources. And you don't take more than you need, that you live seasonally, that perhaps you're more nomadic, or when you do take resources, you ask permission to do it, and relationships with each other is the priority. So when you sit with that for a moment, what do you notice? Sort of related, not on here, is one of the things we talk about in Healing Cities is we talk about sacred spaces or places, maybe churches or mosques or groves of trees or whatever fits in your world. But what if we designed our spaces and places as if everything was sacred? How would that shift? Would we have cities? If we did, what would they look like? I don't have the answers to that. So another thing, sitting with, so what if our kids are a marketing tool to access parents? So it's sort of the whine factor. Mom, can I buy a new bike? What's wrong with the old one? Nothing. Just want a new bike. So, but they've seen this new bike, the famous new bike, or I guess now it's phones. So if our belief is that kids are a marketing tool to access parents, how is that for you? What do you notice when you sit with that? And then contrasting that, we believe kids are sacred and that they're to be held gently to continue on the good work that we're doing. Same kind of contrast thing, seeing women as sexual objects, women as equals. That's been going on for a long time. So you might believe that we need banks, money, jobs, power. That'd be pretty normal. And so noticing what that feels like and then contrasting it with what we need is enough resources. We need to contribute. We need community. Feels a little different. And again, what if we proceed as if we're needy? I mean, we all have certain needs to a certain level, but there's a neediness that is partly born out of this context, the marketing, telling us that we have needs that we don't actually have, kind of thing. So we become needy as a result of that. But the other side of it is, what if we proceeded as if we were need-ed? having done that, I'm curious what's come up for you. Do you feel, does that start gonna make you feel afraid or sad or feel some resistance? Like, I don't wanna talk about that stuff. Maybe you just feel okay. Maybe some kind of joy is like, yay, we're moving to that stuff over there. Anybody wanna share anything they noticed? Yeah.
I think I've heard many times when people paint that vision, the counter argument is, oh, you want to be a communist. You want to live on a commune. So we need to counter that kind of negative image of that baggage that's attached to it. Communism is a very specific model, but that's not what we're talking about.
No, I agree, and I definitely heard that too. And that's part of, my group earlier was the one talking about communication and the vocabulary and how do we communicate these things. It's hard. It's tough. Anybody else have something? Yes, Nicole.
My physical, almost physical reaction is, as we start to vision the right-hand side, I felt freedom. There's a freer sense of, maybe it's because I'm a woman and I'm a mom, and a lot of those filters that I have. But yeah, it's freeing, less controlling, and therefore more appealing.
I think it's hopeful as a grandparent. I do think about my grandchildren and wonder what their lives will be like.
Yeah,
So something hopeful is good.
absolutely. Anybody else?